My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old, and for the last 12 years I've worked as a senior accountant for a private medical network in Chicago. Numbers make sense to me. Patterns make sense to me. People usually don't, especially my family. The invitation came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing payroll discrepancies for one of our clinics downtown. My phone buzzed once. Then again, Mom. I stared at her name longer than I should have. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. Not since my younger brother Ethan accused me of thinking I was better than everyone, after I refused to loan him $20,000 for another failed business idea. Before that, it was always something: a car payment, a rent emergency, a temporary loan that somehow became permanent. And every single time, the same sentence followed me around like a ghost. Family helps family. My mother used it the way other people use prayers. Her message was strangely warm. Dinner tonight? Just us. We miss you. Just us. That should have been my first warning. The restaurant was called Marrow House, one of those downtown steak and seafood places, where the waiters wear tailored black jackets and every appetizer costs more than groceries. Arrived 20 minutes late because traffic on Lakeshore was a nightmare. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The hostess smiled too, brightly. Your party is already seated in the private room. I followed her down a hallway lined with wine displays until she opened a pair of dark wooden doors, and there they were. Not 4 people, not 614. My entire family sat around a massive table glowing under dim amber lights. My uncle, Richard, Aunt Denise, 3 cousins, Ethan and his girlfriend, even my grandmother. Lobster tails covered the table like centerpieces. Giant seafood towers dripped melting ice onto silver trays. Bottles of expensive wine crowded every corner, and directly in the center sat my father, smiling like a man who'd just closed a deal. Claire. He boomed. There she is! Every head turned toward me. Applause followed. Actual applause. My stomach tightened instantly. Mom stood and hugged me too long. We wanted to surprise you. I sat slowly, trying to understand what I was walking into. The smell of butter and garlic filled the room. Half-empty wine glasses told me they'd already been here a while. Plates were stacked everywhere. They'd started without me. My cousin Jenna leaned across the table. You look amazing. Corporate life must be treating you well. There it was. The setup had already started. The waiter appeared beside me immediately. Would you like the lobster special as well, ma'am? Before I answered, Dad cut in. She'll have it. Of course I would. I ordered sparkling water. Instead, Dad laughed loud enough for neighboring tables to hear. Still cheap after all these years. Everyone chuckled politely. I smiled because sometimes smiling is easier than screaming. Dinner moved fast after that. More lobster, more wine, more little comments disguised as jokes. So Claire bought another condo, right? Heard bonuses at hospitals are crazy now. Must be nice not worrying about bills. Each sentence felt rehearsed. Not obvious enough to confront. Just coordinated enough to corner me. I watched Ethan order another bottle of wine without checking the price. My aunt added king crab legs for the table. Uncle Richard asked for the premium whiskey menu. Nobody hesitated, because none of them planned to pay. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. I stood at the sink, staring at my reflection under soft yellow lighting. 34 years old. Exhausted. Still, somehow playing the same role I'd played since I was 20. The responsible one, the fixer, the wallet. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Ethan accidentally dropped into the wrong thread. Family dinner plan. 3. Dots appeared before the message loaded completely. Relax. Claire won't embarrass herself by saying no in front of everybody. My chest went cold. Stared at the screen. Above it were older messages. Dad. Order big before she gets there. Mom. Don't mention the tax issue tonight, Ethan. She makes 6 figures. She'll cover it. Then the one that hurt most. Mom. Least she can do after abandoning this family. I locked my phone slowly. Not angry, not shocked, just finished. That's the dangerous part about people pushing you too far. Eventually, you stop hurting. You just stop caring. When I returned to the table, dessert menus had arrived, chocolate soufflés, imported cheesecake, a gold-flake tiramisu that cost more than my first hourly wage. Dad leaned back in his chair, relaxed now, confident. He thought the performance was over. Then the bill arrived. The waiter placed the black folder directly in front of my father. Dad didn't touch it immediately. Instead, he smiled at me. Well, he said casually, you're paying, right? The room went quiet. 14 faces turned toward me, waiting, expecting. My mother folded her hands like this was already settled. Ethan smirked into his wine glass. You owe us that much, Dad added. There it was. Not gratitude, not love, debt. Everything with them was debt. Every birthday, gift, every sacrifice. Every moment of affection came with an invoice attached. I looked around the table slowly at the lobster, shells, the empty wine bottles, the family who hadn't called me once on my birthday last year suddenly reunited under candlelight because they needed something, or rather, needed someone. Me. I smiled softly. Actually, I said, I already paid my portion. Confusion spread instantly. Dad frowned. What? I reached for my purse calmly, my sparkling water. Plus tip. Silence. Complete silence. You're joking, Ethan said first. I'm not. Dad finally opened the check folder. I watched the color leave his face. $4,218. My aunt gasped quietly. Mom stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Dad lowered his voice. Claire, don't do this here. I almost laughed. Don't do this here, as if I was the one who orchestrated an ambush. You invited 14 people to a luxury restaurant without telling me, I said evenly. You ordered half the menu assuming I'd pay for it. And now you're embarrassed? Mom's eyes filled instantly. We're family. No, I said quietly. I was family when you needed money. That's not the same thing. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. Unbelievable. After everything Mom and Dad did for you. What exactly did they do for me? I asked. Nobody answered, because the truth was dangerous in rooms like this. I stood slowly. My father's voice cracked for the first time all night. Claire. We're struggling. There it was, finally. The real sentence, not jokes, not manipulation. Truth. I looked at him carefully. Really looked at him. The wrinkles seemed deeper tonight. His expensive confidence suddenly looked rented, and for one painful second, I felt guilty. Then I remembered the group. Chat order big before she gets there. She makes 6 figures. She won't say no, not one message asking how I'd been, not one apology, just calculations. I picked up my coat. If you needed help, I said quietly. You could have asked me honestly. Mom started crying harder. But this? I gestured toward the wreckage of the table. This was a trap. Nobody stopped me when I walked away. Not my father. Not my mother. Not Ethan. The valet brought my car around while cold Chicago wind cut through the parking lot. Inside my purse, my phone buzzed endlessly. Calls, texts, angry, messages, guilt, blame, I muted all of them. Then I drove home through the city lights feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Light? Because sometimes the most expensive thing in life isn't money, it's the role people force you to keep playing. And the night I finally refused to pay was the night I stopped being owned. My name is Natalie. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life I thought love meant being useful. Useful daughters got invited to holidays. Useful daughters got hugs. Useful daughters got called back. The useless ones got silence. That lesson started young in my family. My father believed money solved everything. My mother believed guilt finished whatever money couldn't. And my younger brother Caleb learned both lessons perfectly. I learned a different one. Work harder. Pay faster. Stay quiet. By 31, I was a financial analyst at a logistics company in Denver. Good salary. Small condo. Predictable life. I liked predictable. Predictable doesn't suddenly ask for rent money at midnight. The invitation came after 18 months of silence. Mom texted me on a Thursday morning. Your father and I miss you. Let's reconnect. Dinner tonight? Just us. Just us. I stared at those words while sitting in my office break room holding coffee that had already gone cold. 18 months earlier, Caleb had asked me to co-sign a loan for his investment opportunity. I said no after realizing the investment opportunity was two friends trying to open a sports bar with no permits and no business plan. Dad called me selfish. Mom cried. Caleb told relatives I abandoned family. Then nobody spoke to me again. Until now. Part of me knew better than to go. But another part, the smaller, weaker part, still wanted parents. So I said yes. The restaurant was called Verona, downtown, Italian, expensive enough that menus didn't list prices beside certain bottles of wine. I arrived 7 minutes early. My stomach already hurt. Inside, soft piano music floated through the dining room. Candlelight reflected off polished glasses. The hostess smiled when I gave my name. Oh, she said brightly. Your family's already here. Family. Not parents. My chest tightened immediately. She led me toward the private dining area, and I knew before she even opened the door. Too much noise. Too much laughter. Too many voices. The room was packed. 15 people turned toward me all at once. My Aunt Linda, Uncle Mark, 3 cousins, Caleb, his girlfriend, even relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. A long table overflowed with seafood platters, wine bottles, steaks, appetizers still arriving from the kitchen. And at the center sat my father with the smile of a man completely certain of himself. Natalie, he announced loudly. There's our girl. Applause. Real applause. I froze for half a second before forcing myself to move. Mom hugged me tightly. Too tightly. We wanted this to feel special, she whispered. No, they wanted witnesses. That was different. I sat at the only empty chair left at the end of the table. Directly across from my father. Strategic. Always strategic. The waiter immediately appeared beside me. Would you like the lobster ravioli or the filet special? Before I answered, Caleb laughed. She can afford both. The table chuckled. I ordered sparkling water. Dad smirked. Still pinching pennies, huh? No, I just recognized traps when I saw them. Dinner moved like theater after that. Every conversation somehow circled back to money. My promotion, my condo, my salary, my comfortable life. Aunt Linda sighed dramatically. Must be nice not stressing over bills. Uncle Mark added, Your parents sacrificed a lot for you. That sentence nearly made me laugh out loud. Sacrificed what? Because when I was 19, I paid the electric bill after Dad lost work. At 23, I covered Caleb's rent for 6 months. At 27, I paid for Mom's dental surgery after insurance fell through. But somehow the family story always rewrote itself. They sacrificed, I owed. That was the script. And tonight, everyone knew their lines. The food kept coming. More wine, more seafood. More expensive plates landing on the table every 15 minutes. Nobody checked prices. Nobody hesitated. Because this meal already had a designated payer. Me. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. The moment the door closed behind me, I exhaled hard enough to shake. The marble counters reflected soft golden light. Expensive soap. Folded towels. Everything polished. I stared at myself in the mirror. 31 years old. Successful. Independent. And somehow still feeling like a frightened teenager waiting to disappoint her parents. A phone buzzed beside the sink. Caleb's. He'd left it on the counter. The screen lit up automatically. Family plan. A message preview from Dad appeared. Don't let Natalie leave before the check comes. My pulse slowed instead of quickening. That was the strange part. I wasn't shocked. Just tired. I picked up the phone. Scrolled. Mom. Once everyone's there, she won't make a scene. Caleb. Order the expensive stuff early. Dad. She owes this family after disappearing. Mom again. If she says no in front of everyone, she'll look heartless. I set the phone down carefully. There it was. Not reconnection. Not healing, a setup. A performance with 15 supporting actors and one assigned role. The wallet. I walked back to the table calmer than before. Because once you finally see the truth clearly, fear loses its grip. Dessert menus arrived moments later. Chocolate tortes. Imported cheesecake. A whiskey cart rolled beside the table. Dad leaned back confidently, hands folded over his stomach. The king at the head of his kingdom. Then the check arrived. The waiter placed the leather folder directly beside my father. Dad didn't even look at it. He smiled at me instead. Natalie's got this, he announced casually. The room went quiet instantly. 15 faces waiting, watching, expecting compliance the way people expect gravity. Mom gave me that wounded smile mother's perfect over decades. Family takes care of each other, sweetheart. I looked around the table slowly. At the empty wine bottles. At Caleb grinning into his drink. At relatives who ignored me for 18 months suddenly eating lobster under candlelight because my credit card existed. Something inside me finally settled. No, I said softly. Silence. Dad blinked first. What? I said no. Caleb laughed nervously. Okay, funny. Seriously. I'm serious. The waiter stood frozen beside the table, holding the check folder like it might explode. Mom's smile disappeared. Natalie, she whispered sharply, don't embarrass us. Embarrass you. I almost admired the audacity. You invited 15 people to an expensive restaurant without telling me, I said calmly. You ordered thousands of dollars of food expecting me to cover it. And I'm embarrassing you? Dad's face hardened instantly. After everything we've done for you? I looked directly at him. What exactly did you do for me? Nobody answered. Because the truth was sitting at the table with us now. And truth ruins performances. Caleb slammed his glass down. You always thought you were better than us. No, I said quietly. I just finally stopped letting you use me. Mom's eyes filled with tears right on schedule. We just wanted our daughter back. No, I replied. You wanted your bank account back. The silence after that felt enormous, heavy, final. Dad finally opened the check folder. His expression changed immediately. I saw it happen in real time. Confidence, confusion, panic. The bill was over $5,000. He looked up sharply. Natalie. But I was already standing. I picked up my purse slowly. I paid for my water, I said. Plus tip. Mom started crying harder. Caleb cursed under his breath. Dad's voice dropped lower now, smaller. We can't afford this. And there it was. The first honest sentence of the night. For one painful second, guilt hit me hard. Then I remembered the messages. She owes this family. She won't make a scene. Order the expensive stuff early. Not one message asking if I was happy. Not one asking if I'd been lonely during 18 months of silence. Only calculations. Only strategy. Only cost. I looked at my parents one last time. If you needed help, I said quietly. You could have asked honestly. Then I walked out. Nobody followed me. The cold Denver air hit my face the moment I stepped outside. My phone immediately started vibrating. Calls, texts, anger, blame. I muted all of it before reaching my car. Then I sat behind the wheel, staring through the windshield for a long moment. Alone, but lighter. Because sometimes losing the role your family gave you is the first time you finally become yourself. My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old, and for the last 8 years, I've worked as a financial controller for a luxury hotel chain in Chicago. Numbers are my language. I notice patterns, missing decimals, Extra zeros. The tiny details people think nobody sees. That's probably why my mother always hated arguing with me. You can guilt a daughter who runs on emotion. You can't guilt one who keeps receipts. 3 years ago, I stopped answering my family's calls after my younger brother Evan borrowed $18,000 from me to save his gym business and never paid back $1. When I finally said no to another loan, my mother called me selfish. My father told me I'd forgotten where I came from. Then silence. No birthdays. No holidays. Nothing. Until the text arrived, "Mom, we miss you. Let's have dinner and reconnect." Family takes care of family. I stared at those 6 words for a long time. Family takes care of family. My mother used that phrase the way other people use prayers. Soft voice. Warm smile. Hidden price tag. Still, part of me wanted to believe her. So Thursday night, I drove downtown to a restaurant called Marrow House. Upscale steak and seafood. White tablecloths, candlelight. The kind of place where the servers describe the butter like it has a college degree. I parked outside and immediately felt my stomach tighten. Too many cars. I recognized my aunt's Mercedes. My cousin's Jeep, Evan's truck. This wasn't a quiet reconciliation dinner. This was something else. I almost left. I should have. But loneliness makes intelligent people negotiate with bad memories. So I walked inside. The hostess smiled too, quickly when I gave my last name. "Oh," she said carefully. "Your party already started." Started, not waiting. Started. She led me through the dining room toward a massive private table near the back. I heard laughter before I saw faces. Then I turned the corner. 14 people, my entire family. Lobster platters covered the center of the table. Wine bottles stood empty beside half-finished cocktails. Tomahawk steaks, oysters, crab legs. Desserts already ordered. My brother spotted me first. "There she is," Evan shouted, raising his glass. Everyone turned, and suddenly they were smiling like we'd never spent 3 years pretending each other didn't exist. My mother stood up dramatically and hugged me. "Look, at you," she whispered. "It's been too long." I noticed she never said sorry, not once. Dad pulled out the chair beside him. "Sit," he said. "Tonight's about family." I sat because 14 people were staring at me and because old habits are hard to kill. A waiter appeared instantly. "Would you like wine, ma'am?" "Sparkling water," I said. That earned me a look from Aunt Denise. "Still so careful with money," she laughed. The table chuckled softly. I smiled politely. Then I started. Calculating, 2 seafood towers, 3. Bottles of reserve wine, imported whiskey, dry-aged steaks. I didn't even need the menu. The bill was already well over $4,000. And I knew something else too. My father never spent money like this. Never. This was theater. Halfway through dinner, the comments started. Little ones, sharp ones. My cousin Natalie sighed dramatically about rising rent prices. Aunt Denise complained about medical bills. Evan talked about how hard entrepreneurship is these days. Every sentence pointed in one direction. Money. Then, my mother touched my arm gently. "You've done very well for yourself. Claire." There it was. I took a sip of water. "I work hard." Dad nodded slowly. "Family always said you'd make it big." Funny. 3 years ago, they said I was greedy. The waiter brought another bottle of wine. My father didn't even glance at the price before nodding approval. That's when I knew for sure. He wasn't planning to pay. Dessert arrived. Chocolat soufflé, cheesecake, gold-flaked tiramisu. The table relaxed into that comfortable, careless mood people get when they believe someone else is covering the check. Then Evan leaned back in his chair and grinned. "So, Claire," he said loudly, "you got this tonight, right?" Silence. Not shocked silence. Expected silence. Everyone looked at me the same way. Like the decision had already been made. Mom smiled softly. "Family takes care of family." There it was again. That sentence. That weapon wrapped in velvet. I looked around the table slowly. 14 people. Not one apology. Not one acknowledgement of the years they erased me. Just lobster shells and wine stains and expectations. Then I remembered something. 10 minutes earlier, I'd gone to the restroom and passed the service station near the kitchen. I overheard my mother talking to the manager. She always pays, she whispered confidently. Just bring the check directly to her. Always pays. Not Claire. Not daughter. Not sister. A credit card with legs. I felt something inside me go completely still. Not anger, clarity. I smiled. Excuse me, I said calmly. I'm just going to speak with the waiter. Mom relaxed instantly. Dad leaned back confidently. They thought they'd won. I walked toward the service station where a young server named Miguel was organizing receipts. He looked exhausted. I recognized the expression immediately. Restaurant fatigue. The 1,000-yard stare of someone surviving a double shift. I lowered my voice. I'm not paying for that table tonight. Miguel blinked. I continued calmly. The reservation is under Robert Bennett, my father. His card is attached to the booking. Miguel glanced toward the table nervously. Then back at me. You'd like the check presented to him? Yes. And your order? 1 sparkling water. He looked stunned for half a second. Then he smiled slightly, honestly, respectfully. Understood. I paid immediately. Water plus a 40% tip? His eyes widened when he saw the amount. You didn't deserve that table tonight, I told him quietly. Neither did he. I returned to my seat and waited. 10 peaceful minutes passed. Then Miguel approached carrying the leather check folder. He placed it directly in front of my father. The entire table froze. Dad frowned. Small at first, confused, then irritated. He pushed the folder toward me casually. There you go, kiddo. I pushed it back. No, I said quietly. That's yours. The room changed temperature. Mom laughed nervously. Oh, Claire, stop joking. I'm not joking. Dad's face hardened. You're really going to do this here? Do this. Interesting phrase. As if I created the situation instead of walking into it. Miguel stood frozen beside the table. Poor kid. Dad pulled out his card dramatically and handed it over. Run it. Miguel disappeared. The silence that followed was suffocating. Nobody touched dessert. Nobody spoke. Then Miguel returned. His face told the story before his mouth did. I'm sorry, sir, he said carefully. The card was declined. My father's face lost color instantly. Run it again. Miguel nodded. 2 minutes later, he returned. Still declined. Mom started panicking quietly. Dad pulled out another card. Then another. Each one failed. And suddenly the performance collapsed. No more confident smiles. No more speeches about family. Just fear, raw and ugly. Finally, Dad looked at me. Not angry, desperate. Claire, he said quietly, we're in trouble. There it was. The truth. Not reconnecting. Not healing. Debt. They invited me there because they were drowning and decided to use me as the life raft. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then my mother spoke. You can help us, she whispered, after everything we sacrificed for you. And just like that, the sympathy disappeared. Because even now, even humiliated, they still believed my existence was a debt they could collect forever. I stood slowly, picked up my purse, looked directly at my mother. You didn't invite me to dinner, I said calmly. You invited my bank account. Nobody spoke. You stopped being my family the moment love became a transaction. Mom started crying immediately, loudly, publicly. Dad stared at the table. Evan looked furious. But none of them denied it. That was the part I remember most. Nobody denied it. I turned toward the exit. Behind me, 14 people sat trapped beside a $4,000 bill, and the consequences of finally meeting a version of me that no longer paid for peace. Outside, the night air felt cold and clean. I sat in my car for a full minute before starting the engine. My phone buzzed nonstop the entire drive home. Calls, texts, voicemails. I ignored all of them. Because for the first time in my life, silence wasn't punishment. It was freedom. My name is Natalie. I'm 31 years old, and for the last decade, I've worked in corporate fraud prevention for a regional bank in Atlanta. My entire career revolves around one thing. People lie. They lie when they're desperate. They lie when they're embarrassed. And sometimes, they lie so long they forget the truth has a receipt attached to it. My father was one of those people. 3 years ago, he told the entire family I was selfish because I refused to co-sign a second mortgage on their house after his construction company started collapsing. According to him, I had abandoned the family after making it big. What actually happened was simpler. I finally stopped funding grown adults who treated my paycheck like a community resource. After that fight, my relatives stopped calling, no birthdays, no holidays, nothing, until my Aunt Denise called on a Tuesday afternoon. "Honey," she said warmly, "your father wants to make things right. Sunday dinner, just family, just family." That phrase should have warned me, but loneliness can make even intelligent people nostalgic for places that hurt them. So Sunday evening, I drove 45 minutes to an expensive steakhouse called the Grand Elm, the kind of restaurant with valet parking and piano music soft enough to sound expensive. The moment I stepped inside, my stomach tightened, too loud, too many voices. Then the hostess smiled carefully when I said my last name. "Oh," she said, "your party is already enjoying appetizers. Party, not table. Party." She led me through the dining room, past couples sipping wine and businessmen pretending not to check their phones. Then I saw them. 16 relatives, my entire father's side of the family packed, around 2 long tables pushed together beneath a chandelier lobster trays, seafood towers, steaks bigger than dinner plates, 3 bottles of wine already open, and at the center of it all sat my father smiling like a king hosting a banquet he couldn't afford. "There she is," he announced loudly. Every head turned toward me. 16 people, staring. My chest tightened instantly. This wasn't reconciliation. This was an audience. Dad stood and opened his arms. Dramatically. "Come hug your old man." I hugged him, because refusing in front of 16 relatives would instantly make me the villain. He knew that. That's the thing about manipulative people. They weaponize politeness. I sat near the end of the table beside my cousin Rachel, who suddenly became deeply interested in her wine glass instead of making eye contact. The waiter approached. "What can I get you tonight, ma'am?" "Sparkling water," I said. Dad laughed loudly. "Still pinching pennies, huh?" The table chuckled politely. I smiled, but inside, I was already counting. 2 seafood platters alone were over $700. The wine? At least $250 a bottle. Steaks, apps, desserts, already ordered at the far end. This dinner was heading toward $4,000, minimum, and my father never spent money like this. Never. When I was growing up, he reused paper towels. This wasn't celebration, it was a setup. The comments started slowly. Aunt Denise sighed. About medical bills. My cousin Brian complained about layoffs. Uncle Rick joked that successful people should help the rest of us little guys. Every sentence drifted toward me like smoke. Then, Dad leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Proudly, Natalie works for a bank now," he announced. "Big corporate job. Makes more money than anyone at this table." Hated that, not because it was untrue, because he only sounded proud when my income benefited him. The waiter brought another wine bottle. Dad didn't even look at the price before, nodding. Performance. Everything about tonight was performance. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. I needed air. Silence. 5 uninterrupted seconds where nobody expected anything from me. On the way back, I passed the service station near the kitchen, and that's when I heard my father's voice. "She'll pay," he told the waiter confidently. "She always does." The waiter sounded uncertain. "Sir, for large parties we usually—" Dad interrupted him. "My daughter handles it." Don't embarrass her by bringing the check to me. I stopped, walking. Something inside me became perfectly calm. Not angry, clear, because suddenly every confusing part of the night made sense. The oversized table, the expensive restaurant, the audience, the fake reconciliation. This wasn't dinner. This was public pressure disguised as family. Love. And my father was counting on the same thing he'd counted on my entire life, my fear of making a scene. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds listening to silverware clatter behind the kitchen doors. Then I walked calmly to the manager. Stationed a woman named Elise stood reviewing receipts on a screen. Professional, sharp, tired. Eyes restaurant people recognize each other instantly, even across industries. She looked at me the way people do when they know something complicated is walking toward them. Lowered my voice. I'm not paying for that table tonight. Her expression didn't change. Good managers never look surprised. The reservation is under Daniel Mercer, I continued. My father. Please present the bill directly to him. She studied my face carefully, probably measuring whether this would become chaos. Then I added softly, and separate my sparkling water onto its own bill. Elise nodded once. Understood. No judgment. No questions, just professional understanding. I paid immediately, 1 sparkling water, plus a 35% tip. Then I walked back to the table. Dad was midway through another performance. Story about how family should always stick together. The irony almost made me laugh. Dessert. Arrived 20 minutes later. Chocolate cake. Creme brulee. Bread pudding covered in bourbon. Sauce. Everyone relaxed further into their chairs with the lazy confidence of people convinced someone else is funding the evening. Then, Dad finally said it. Well, he announced loudly, patting his stomach. Good thing Natalie's here to spoil us tonight. There it was. Not a question, a declaration. Several relatives laughed immediately. My aunt raised her wine glass toward me. So generous of you, sweetheart. I looked around the table slowly. 16 people, not one of them surprised, because they all knew this had been planned before I ever walked through the door. I smiled softly. Then I picked up my water and took a sip. That's interesting, I said calmly. Dad frowned slightly. What is? The fact that you volunteered me to pay before asking. The room shifted immediately. Tiny movements. Avoided eye contact. Fork slowing. Dad forced a laugh. Oh, come on. Don't make it awkward. Too late. It already was. Right on cue, Elise approached carrying the leather check presenter, and instead of placing it near me, she placed it directly in front of my father. Silence. Absolute silence. Dad stared at the folder, then at me, then back at the folder. Small crack in the performance. You gave her the wrong seat, he told Elise. Professional smile. No, sir. The reservation and card on file are both under your name. Beautiful. Dad's face tightened. Well, he muttered loudly. Run the card. He handed over his credit card with forced confidence. But I noticed something important. His hand shook. Elise disappeared. Nobody spoke while she was gone. His 16 relatives suddenly fascinated by napkins. Glasses, candles, walls, anything except each other. Then Elise returned. I'm sorry, sir, she said gently. The card was declined. The air changed instantly. Dad blinked hard. What? I can rerun it if you'd like. Run it. Again, she did. Still declined. Dad's confidence began. Collapsing in real time, he pulled another card from his wallet. Then another. Each. One failed, and suddenly the truth he'd spent years hiding exposed itself in front of 16 relatives. The successful businessman wasn't successful. The loud patriarch couldn't cover dinner. The man who humiliated me publicly couldn't even pay for the performance. Dad looked at me then. Not angry, desperate, Natalie. Just my name. Nothing after it. Because everyone already understood what he wanted. I looked at him quietly. across a table covered in lobster shells and empty wine. Glasses. Then I said the calmest sentence of my life. Wanted to embarrass me in front of 16 people. I leaned back slightly. But it looks like your credit card handled that part for me. Nobody moved. Nobody defended him. Because the ugliest truth in the room wasn't the declined card. It was that everyone there knew exactly what this dinner had been. Trap. And traps only work when the target still cares more about peace than dignity. I didn't anymore. So I stood, picked up my purse, and walked out, while 16 relatives sat in complete silence beside a bill nobody suddenly wanted to claim. My name is Erica. I'm 33 years old, and I manage procurement contracts for a hotel company in Dallas. My entire job revolves around budgets, negotiations, and people pretending they can afford things they absolutely cannot. So when my family suddenly invited me back into their lives after 3 years of silence, I should have known exactly what was happening. I just didn't want to believe it. 3 years earlier, my younger brother Caleb decided he wanted to open a craft brewery with 2 friends who spent more time talking about brand energy than actual business plans. They needed investors, or more specifically, they needed me. My parents called me on a Sunday afternoon, Mom cried. Dad lectured. Caleb promised it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They wanted $60,000, not a loan, an investment. I asked questions, revenue projections, lease agreements, licensing, debt ratios. Caleb rolled his eyes halfway through. Dad finally snapped first. Not everything is about spreadsheets, Erica. But to me, everything involving money should involve spreadsheets. I said no. And just like that, I became the villain. Dad called me selfish. Mom said I'd abandoned the family. Caleb told relatives I cared more about money than blood. Then came silence. 3 birthdays passed without a phone call. 3 Christmases without a card. 3 years where my existence only mattered when they needed something. Then one Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at her name for nearly 30 seconds before answering. Her voice sounded warm, careful, rehearsed. Sweetheart, she said softly, we miss you. Your father wants to reconnect. Family dinner this Friday? Family dinner, 2 words capable of making grown adults forget every warning sign in front of them. I almost said no, I should have. But there's something painful about being unwanted by the people who taught you what love was supposed to look like. Even after years of distance, part of me still wanted my family back. So Friday evening, I drove downtown to a restaurant called Laurent's Upscale French Steakhouse. Valet parking. Crystal chandeliers. The kind of place where the menus don't list prices unless you specifically ask. The moment I stepped inside, my stomach tightened. Too many people. Too much noise. The hostess smiled awkwardly when I gave my last name. Oh, she said carefully. Your party has already started. Started, not waiting. Started. She led me toward the private dining area in the back, and I heard laughter before I saw faces. Then I turned the corner. 16 relatives. My entire extended family sat around a long table covered in seafood platters. Wine bottles, steaks, appetizers, and desserts already half finished. My father sat at the center, smiling proudly like a man hosting a celebration instead of an ambush. There she is, he announced loudly, every head turned toward me at once. 16 pairs of eyes, measuring, watching, expecting. My mother rushed over and hugged me dramatically. Oh, honey, she whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. It's so good to have you back. Back? Interesting? Word. You can't come back somewhere you were thrown out of. I sat carefully near the end of the table while cousins and aunts greeted me with fake warmth polished. Over 3 years of silence, the waiter approached. Immediately, what would you like to drink tonight? Sparkling water, I said. Dad laughed, still practical as ever. The table chuckled politely. I smiled faintly while silently calculating the damage already sitting on the table. Lobster, Wagyu steaks, imported wine, oysters, aged whiskey. This dinner was approaching $4,000 easily, and my father hated expensive restaurants. Growing up, he complained about paying extra for guacamole, which meant one thing. This dinner wasn't meant to be affordable. It was meant to be charged to someone else. The pressure started. Subtly, Aunt Linda complained about rising mortgage rates. Cousin Ben mentioned medical debt. My uncle joked about successful family members carrying the rest of us. Every conversation slowly drifted toward money the way rivers drift toward oceans. Then Caleb leaned back in his chair and grinned at me. Heard you got another promotion. Regional procurement director? I said calmly. Dad whistled dramatically. Big corporate money now. There it was, the real reason I was invited. Not because they missed me, because they remembered my salary. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. I needed silence, a locked door, cold water. 30 seconds where nobody expected me to finance their lives. On the way back, I passed the service station near the kitchen, and that's when I heard my mother speaking quietly to the waiter. She'll take care of the bill, Mom whispered confidently. Just bring it directly to her. Don't make a scene. I stopped walking. The waiter looked uncertain. It's a large total, ma'am. Mom smiled softly. My daughter handles things. Always has. Always has. That sentence hit harder than I expected, because she was right. For years, I had handled things. Utility bills. Emergency loans. Caleb's rent twice. Dad's truck repairs. Mom's dental surgery. I had trained them to believe my wallet existed for family emergencies. And eventually, they decided their luxuries counted as emergencies too. Something inside me became very calm. Not angry finished. I walked quietly to the front, manager station, where a woman named Sophia reviewed receipts on a tablet. Professional, sharp-eyed, exhausted, in the way restaurant managers always are. I lowered my voice. I'm not paying for that table. Tonight. Her expression remained perfectly neutral. The reservation is under Thomas Whitaker, I continued. My father. Please present the check directly to him. She studied me carefully, then nodded once. Understood. And separate my sparkling water onto its own check. No questions. No judgment, just professional understanding. Between two women who both recognized manipulation when they saw it. I paid immediately. Sparkling water, plus a 40% tip. Then I returned to the table. Dad was midway through telling relatives how important family loyalty was. The irony, almost, made me laugh out loud. Dessert arrived 20 minutes later. Chocolate souffle. Vanilla bean cheesecake, espresso martinis. The table relaxed into that comfortable, lazy confidence people have when they believe someone else is paying. Then Caleb finally said it. So, Erica, he grinned, raising his glass. Thanks for treating everybody tonight. Not a request. An assumption. Because they had already decided my role before I walked through the door. Several relatives smiled immediately. Mom touched my arm gently. Family takes care of family. That sentence again. Always wrapped in warmth. Always carrying a bill underneath it. I smiled softly. Then I took a slow sip of sparkling water. That's interesting, I said calmly. Dad frowned slightly. What is? The fact nobody asked me. Silence. Tiny shifts around the table. Eyes dropping. Forks pausing. Then Sophia appeared carrying the leather check folder. And instead of placing it near me, she placed it directly in front of my father. The room froze. Dad stared at the folder. Then at me, then back at the folder. Small crack in the performance. You gave it to the wrong person, he said tightly. Sophia smiled politely. The reservation and card on file are under your name, sir. Beautiful. Dad forced a laugh and handed over his credit card. Run it. Sophia disappeared. Nobody spoke while she was gone. 16 relatives suddenly fascinated by candles and tablecloths. Then Sophia returned. "I'm sorry, sir," she said gently. The card was declined. Dad's face lost color instantly. "Run it again." She did. Declined again. Then another card. Declined. Another. Declined. And suddenly the entire performance collapsed in front of 16 relatives. No more confidence. No more speeches. No more pretending. Just panic. Raw and humiliating. Dad finally looked at me. Not angry, desperate. "Erica, please." That word almost hurt. Almost. Then Mom spoke softly beside him. "You have more than enough to help us." And there it was. The truth, not love, not reconciliation, not family, access. They didn't miss me. They missed what I paid for. I stood slowly and picked up my purse. "You cut me off for 3 years," I said calmly. Then invited me back to finance a luxury dinner. Nobody denied it. That was the loudest part. Nobody denied it. I looked around the table one final time. 16 relatives. Empty wine glasses. Lobster shells. Silence thick enough to choke on. Then I smiled softly at my father. "You should have invited a daughter," I said quietly. "Not an ATM." And I walked out while 16 people sat staring at a bill none of them could afford without the woman they spent 3 years pretending not to need. My name is Vanessa. I'm 35 years old, and I work as a senior compliance officer for a pharmaceutical company in Seattle. My job exists because people cut corners when they think nobody's watching. I notice details for a living. Who hesitates before answering? Who smiles too quickly? Who spends money they clearly don't have? That's why the moment I walked into Bellamy's steakhouse and saw my sister ordering her 3rd lobster tail before I'd even sat down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how ugly it was about to get. 3 years earlier, my younger sister Lily stopped speaking to me after I refused to help pay off her credit card debt for the 4th time. Not because I hated her, because I was tired. Tired of being the responsible daughter, the emergency contact, the backup wallet. Our parents always protected Lily because she was free-spirited. Free-spirited is a beautiful phrase people use when someone else is paying for the consequences. When I finally said no, Lily cried. Mom called me cold. Dad said success had changed me. Then silence. 3 years. No holidays. No birthday calls. Nothing. Until my mother texted me 2 weeks before my birthday. "We should reconnect." Family dinner. "Lily misses you." I almost laughed reading it. Lily didn't miss me. Lily missed access. Still, some stupid part of me hoped maybe enough time had passed for everyone to grow up. So Friday night, I drove downtown to Bellamy's upscale. Dim lighting. Piano music soft enough to sound expensive. The kind of restaurant where the waiters describe the origin story of your potatoes before serving them. The hostess smiled politely when I gave my name. "Oh," she said carefully. "Your party is in the private room." Private room. My stomach tightened instantly. She opened the doors, and there they were. 15 relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents, and Lily sitting in the center wearing a white blazer like she was hosting an award show. The table was already covered in appetizers, seafood towers, steaks, wine bottles, cocktails glowing under candlelight. They'd started without me. That told me everything. "There she is," Lily shouted dramatically. Every head turned, 15 faces smiling too. Hard. My mother rushed over and hugged me. "You look amazing," she whispered. "Not, I'm sorry, not, we missed you, just performance." Dad shook my hand like we were business partners instead of family. I sat slowly near the end of the table while relatives welcomed me back into a family that conveniently forgot I existed for 3 years. Waiter appeared instantly. "What would you like to drink tonight?" "Sparkling water," I said. Lily laughed loudly. "Still boring, the pho." Table chuckled. I smiled politely. while mentally calculating the damage already. Sitting on the table, 3 bottles of wine, aged ribeye, king crab, imported, oysters. This dinner was already nearing $4,000. And my parents were not wealthy people. Dad once drove across town to save 4 cents a gallon on gas. Nobody at this table could afford this meal comfortably, which meant somebody else was expected to. Halfway through dinner, the comments started, drifting toward money, subtle at first. Aunt Carla complained about property taxes. My cousin Josh joked about inflation. Mom sighed dramatically about how hard retirement has become. And Lily kept ordering another lobster plate, another cocktail, another appetizer for the table. She ordered like someone shopping with a stolen credit card. Then dessert menus arrived. That's when she finally leaned toward me with that smile I remembered from childhood, the one she used right before asking for something she already assumed she'd get. Relax, she laughed softly. You can afford it. The table went quiet for half a second. Not shocked, expectant. Because everyone already knew this wasn't a dinner invitation. It was a collection strategy. I looked around. Slowly, nobody looked uncomfortable enough that hurt more than I expected. Because it meant they'd discussed this beforehand, agreed to it, planned it. I smiled. Faintly? Afford what? I asked calmly. Lily waved her hand dramatically at the table. All this. Don't act surprised. Dad avoided eye contact immediately. Mom suddenly became very interested in her napkin. There it was, the truth sitting naked in the middle of the table beside the lobster shells. They invited me because they assumed I'd pay, not because they loved me, not because they missed me, because I had a stable salary and a history of avoiding conflict. I took a slow sip of sparkling water. Then I excused myself calmly and walked toward the restroom. Not because I needed the restroom, because I needed clarity. On the way there, I passed the service station and overheard my mother speaking quietly to the restaurant manager. She always handles these things, Mom whispered confidently. Just give her the bill directly. Always handles these things. That sentence landed like a knife. Because she was right. For years, I handled everything. Dad's medical bills, Lily's rent, Mom's dental work, holiday dinners, emergency repairs. Every crisis quietly rerouted toward me. Because I solved problems faster than everyone else. And eventually they stopped seeing me as a daughter. I became infrastructure. Something inside me went completely still. I walked calmly toward the manager station, where a woman named Elise reviewed receipts. Professional, sharp, tired. Eyes that had seen every kind of family drama imaginable. I lowered my voice. I'm not paying for that table tonight. She didn't blink. Good managers never do. The reservation is under Daniel Mercer, I continued. My father. Please present the full check directly to him. She studied my face carefully, probably deciding whether this would explode publicly. Then I added softly, separate my sparkling water onto its own check. Elise nodded once. Understood. No judgment. No hesitation, just quiet professionalism. I paid immediately. Sparkling water plus a 40% tip. Then I walked back to the table. Dessert had arrived. Chocolate soufflés. Creme brulee. Expensive whiskey. Lily looked completely relaxed. Now confident but victorious. That confidence lasted exactly 7 minutes. Elise approached carrying the leather check folder and placed it directly in front of my father. The room froze instantly. Dad stared at the folder, then at me, then back at the folder. Confusion cracked across his face. I think that belongs down there, he said tightly, pointing toward me. Elise smiled politely. The reservation and card on file are both under your name. Sir? Beautiful. Lily's smile disappeared immediately. Dad forced a laugh and handed over his credit card. Run it. Elise disappeared. Nobody spoke while she was gone. 15 relatives suddenly, fascinated by candles, silverware, walls, anything except each other. Then Elise returned. "I'm sorry, sir," she said gently. The card was declined. Silence. Dad blinked hard. "What?" "I can try it again." "Do it." She did. Declined again. Then another. Card declined, another declined, and suddenly everything fell apart exactly where Lily least expected it to. At dessert, the perfect family. Performance collapsed beneath melted chocolate and unpaid lobster. Dad's face drained of color. Mom looked close to tears. Lily stared directly at me now, not embarrassed, angry. Because entitlement always becomes anger the moment access disappears. "Seriously?" she snapped. "You're really doing this?" Doing this interesting phrase. As if I created the situation instead of simply refusing to rescue it. I looked directly at my sister across a table covered in expensive mistakes. "You invited me here to pay for your luxury dinner," I said calmly. Mom started crying immediately. Dad stared at the tablecloth. Nobody defended themselves, because nobody could. The truth was too obvious now. Lily folded her arms tightly. "You can afford it." I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said quietly. Then I looked around the silent table. But finally, I can also afford to say no. Nobody spoke as I stood up and picked up my purse. Not one relative stopped me. Because deep down, every person at that table knew exactly what this dinner had been. Not reconciliation, not love. An invoice disguised as family. And for the first time in my life, I refused to pay it. And if this story hit something inside you, then you already know what to do. Subscribe to Secret Truth Stories for more emotional and powerful, real-life inspired stories like this. Leave a like if you've ever had to choose your peace over people who didn't value it, and comment below, because your story might be the next one we tell. I'll see you in the next one.